I came to the realization, and this is the truth. I came to the realization that sometimes love is not enough.
What happens when the way we were raised doesn't quite fit into the way that we're raising our children today?
Being able to gently parent in a system that does not serve our children is a whole damn privilege.
Is this for me?
Mm.
You don't see anyone who looks like us talking about parenting in that kind of way.
We need to unlearn the agency that other people had over our bodies and over our minds. Understanding that generational trauma will help you to understand the beliefs that you're still holding on to that probably aren't even yours.
We're talking about something many of us feel deeply, but rarely name out loud. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Squiggly Motherhood. Today we're talking about something many of us feel deeply, but rarely name out loud. What happens when the way we were raised doesn't quite fit into the way that we're raising our children today? To help us unpack this, I'm joined by Mariam, a parent mentor, academic, and founder of Black and Brown Parenting, a community dedicated to supporting parents as they navigate identity, culture, and healing. Mariam, welcome. I'm really excited for this conversation today and to really to talk about everything that we've got planned. So my first question to you is to tell us a little bit about your motherhood journey, the topics that you cover. Just give a little bit of insight into that.
First of all, thank you so much, Nicole, for having me on. I genuinely am really looking forward to this conversation. So yeah, as Nicole said, my name is Mariam. I am the founder and CEO of Black and Brown Parenting. And before we go into that, I always like to introduce myself first and foremost as a mum, because I am a mother, and I am a mother of three amazing girls who bring a lot of chaos into my life, but at the same time, they have helped me to grow so much, and I'm sure we'll go into that through this episode. But the topics I tend to speak on are very much parenting, but very much culturally relevant parenting. So I talk a lot about the generational trauma that particularly Black and Brown communities have experienced and how it impacts our parenting styles today. I talk a lot about identity, talk a lot about healing, but also decolonization. And that comes from my academics and my degrees in South Asian and African colonial history, and how that kind of brings us to how we are as a community
Yeah.
today. So that's the main topics I speak on.
And I guess, how has your journey of motherhood, like how have the two come together? As you kind of became a mum and then you went on to have your second and your third daughter, how did your studies and your knowledge, how did they intertwine and blend in?
I came to the realization, and this is the truth. I came to the realization that sometimes love is not enough.
Oof, say that again. Sometimes love.
Sometimes it's not enough, because whilst I knew I was loved growing up, and God bless my parents, but when I became a mother, I just knew there was something, and I'll talk about what I mean by that. But the second part to how this all came about was also that whose story is not being told. Because when I became a mother, I knew there were parts of my upbringing that I didn't want to bring into the way that I was going to raise my girls. And then I looked for, communities, I looked for
Yeah.
support, I looked for all of that, as we do as mums. But there was something that was missing. And that something that was missing was the cultural relevancy, but also the histories that shaped our communities.
Yeah.
So many of your listeners, and even yourself, Nicole, you're probably quite familiar with, the terms like positive, gentle parenting, conscious parenting, perhaps. So I was into all of that. I read all the books and,
Yeah.
all of that stuff, as we do, but I couldn't apply any of it.
Yeah.
And then when I took my knowledge and understanding of the histories that shaped our communities, I was like, damn, okay, I
Mm.
get it. I get it. I get why my behavior is a certain way towards the kids. I get why certain, personality traits or flaws, shall we say, or character that I have, things that shaped me. I understand parts of my upbringing and why they were the way that they were. And for me, that was just a missing story that
Yeah.
wasn't being told. That narrative just wasn't there. So for a long time, I blamed myself. I blamed myself as a mum, and I thought, well, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
because why am I not able to just enjoy this? And it was only until I kind of put the two together, I thought, okay, this makes sense. And then from there, things started to change.
I can I can only imagine how when you were going through that, about having that realization, you were, I don't want to like speak for you, but very maybe potentially really hard on yourself, and yeah, sitting there figuring like, well, why are all these other mums over here able to parent in this particular way, but I'm finding it so difficult and so challenging.
Do you know, Nicole, it's so interesting that you say that because I speak to so many parents. And obviously, like I mentioned in the beginning, that majority of my work is with Black and sort of South Asian parents. And I remember this one parent who said this to me because I felt this exact same way. I went to the parks. So my two older girls are a lot older now. They're in that sort of teenage hormonal age, but I've still got my youngest who's 5, right? So we're still in there. We're still there. But I remember when they were the 2 were, so I had a 2-year-old and a newborn, and when you're in that lack of sleep, just
Yeah.
surviving phase, I remember just sitting in the park and there was this white parent, and she was speaking so lovingly and so kind and just such beautiful, bless them. But I looked at her and I thought, "Why can't I be like that?
Mm,
What's wrong with me? Why can't I speak so softly and gently and, have that beautiful relationship that they definitely seem to have? What's wrong with me?" Not understanding that there was so much history, personal history, but also ancestral history that shaped so many of our homes.
yeah, 100%. And I sometimes when I'm reading some of the literature around like gentle parenting or conscious parenting, I think to myself, is this for me?
Mm,
You don't, and uh it's always presented from a white woman's perspective.
yeah.
And so it feels like something that is not accessible or not for me. You don't see anyone who looks like us talking about parenting in that kind of way. You don't see it. It doesn't happen unless it's on TikTok as a joke.
Mm, I see them ones. I know what
Yeah.
you mean.
Yeah, where they're like, oh, gentle parenting is like, oh, actually, this, this is how my parents did it, or this is how it is in the Caribbean, or, making fun of some of the more harder ways that some of us were brought up. But in terms of being like, well, actually, I really want to parent in this way, and what does it look like for me? And I don't know any other content other than yours, but where it's someone who is Black or brown talking about that, it's just doesn't feel like accessible or something that is made for us.
Do you know, and I think that's what it comes down to, because something that I'm really big on, just generally as a person, but definitely as a mother, is representation.
Mm,
So, just for everyone that's listening, just to give you a sort of a background insight, a little bit about me. So, I do come from a predominantly South Asian background, but my grandmother, she was Sudanese, and it's a long family history story, but there was elements of her blackness that she had to hide.
mm,
So for me, representation is absolutely huge. So in Nicole, what you said, it's sometimes you don't believe you can do something because you cannot see it.
yeah,
And
100%.
once you see it, then it's like, I identify with that. And that is also possible for me. Or maybe I can start to think of doing something that way because that man or that woman or that person that looks like me or was from a similar background is doing that thing. And it gives you hope.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think as well, it's seeing somebody do it that looks like you, but then it's also someone who's had a similar upbringing
Yeah.
to us as well.
I think it's that I'm not alone feeling
Yeah.
as well, in the sense that, okay, our upbringings are similar, which means I'm not the only person who went through it, which means that I can not overcome my upbringing, but as in I am not doomed to just repeating my entire upbringing.
Yeah.
Therefore, another way is possible. And until you have that, and I think this is the most important thing for me, definitely in my journey, is until I either saw it, I got to a point where it was like, well, if I can't see it, I've got to create it. Because surely
Mm,
there are other mothers out there, other women out there who are feeling the same way. And that's when I started to kind of share my experiences. and just bring in the knowledge of obviously the academic side of things of, well, I want us all to know that this is why we are the way we are, right? It's not a personal flaw. These are not our personal failures. In fact, they're rooted in systemic issues. But whilst we can't crash and burn down the whole system as much as we would love to, there are ways to overcome these things. And, you know,
Yeah.
here we are today.
And here we are. If you're enjoying this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with a friend. It just helps other people to find us. Now, back to the episode. And I guess that touched nicely on kind of generational trauma and the trauma that we see within Black and brown communities. I guess my first question to you is, do you think as a Black or brown mother, woman, we have to acknowledge and name the trauma first to be able to break the cycle and think about how we want to parent differently? Does that recognition need to happen first, and we need to really comprehend that trauma to be able to make change?
I would say we must. We must. Because without acknowledging that trauma, just like I did, you will see that as a personal flaw instead of a systemically rooted issue. It's so incredibly important that the reason why you value silence, or the reason why you need your child to just automatically blindly obey whatever you say, or the reason why you think tough love is better, is because of that generational trauma. And whilst it's not an excuse for your behavior, it gives you an understanding of where did those beliefs come from in the first place? How did that parenting style just develop in our homes, in your parents or your grandparents? And in understanding that, you start to then be able to challenge your own beliefs. Is that really something that I believe to be true? Is that really something that I want my child to internalize, that the only way that I can love them is through harshness, is through, you know, harsh discipline, or that they need to be silenced, or they need to be whoever I expect them to be? And I know this all sounds really wild when we say it out loud, but the reality is, and I did the same with my girls, especially in the beginning, is that is what I expected of them. And I know for a lot of us, Nicole, you probably will be able to resonate with this, and I'm sure everybody who's listening, is that a lot of us, when we became mums, we probably said, you know, I'm not going to do certain things. I wouldn't do that to my children because I know what that feels like. But yet, I'm going to speak for myself. I'm going to say that I did a lot of those things. And I didn't understand why. So understanding that generational trauma will help you to understand the beliefs that you're still holding on to that probably aren't even yours, the parenting styles that you're holding on to that definitely aren't yours. So it gives you that understanding, but also the understanding of your own upbringing as well.
Mm. How do you... So I'm in therapy. I've been in therapy for the last 5 and a bit years, so a long time. So like a lot of these, like I have someone that I work with on a regular basis to identify like what was traumatic for me in my childhood, how to get through it, all of that good stuff. But I just wonder, it's a harsh reality to face when you're sitting there being like, that was actually trauma. You know what I mean? Because I distinctly remember being with an old work colleague where I used to work years and years ago. And we were sitting there as an African woman. We were sitting there laughing and joking about the things that happened to us growing up. And we're there, you know, kicking and cacaing and, you know, and it was all just, we're just joking. But actually, we were laughing and joking about trauma, about things that happened to us that I would never do now with my kids. So I just think, how do you sit there as a parent and really go, actually, that wasn't on. Yes, you can give your parents grace. You know, they were working with the best that they had at their time. But to sit there as an individual and realize that was traumatic for me, that's a hard pill to swallow.
That's a really hard pill to swallow, and it's probably why majority, and I'm just talking about parents just broadly here, I'm not just talking about mothers, majority of Black and brown parents would say, well, I turned out fine. And that's my one-liner. I turned out fine. It made me stronger. It made me who I am. Blah, blah, blah. You know, and I always have these conversations with my dad. If any of you have listened to me speak before, I always talk about my dad. God bless him. He will never acknowledge trauma. If you want to see someone who just pretends trauma doesn't exist, like, speak to my dad, and he always says to me, "Oh, you're going on live TV again. What are you going to talk about, Mariam?" And I smile at him, and he's like, "Oh, I know, the childhood trauma thing." He makes a joke out of it because apparently it doesn't exist. Right? But on a serious level, it is the most difficult thing in the world to acknowledge that what you experienced was trauma. And I know that sometimes a lot of us also feel guilt for accepting that it's trauma, because we have this kind of these ideals of, not ideals, like our beliefs of what respect is in our community, and loyalty to our parents and servitude and all of that sort of stuff sometimes keeps us away from even just accepting the fact that, oh my goodness, that was trauma. But what we need to understand is that for majority of our parents, it wasn't something that was done intentionally. Nicole, like you said, most of them, right? Most of them, and I want to be very careful when I say this, that I am not romanticizing harm in any way, but most of them did the best that they could given what they were working with. So with all the generational trauma that they were carrying, and a lot of the beliefs weren't theirs either. It's just that they didn't have the privilege that you and I do today to sit here and have this conversation and talk about parenting and talk about who we are. But for them, their goal was simply survival. And when I say survival, I don't mean just surviving the day. I literally mean keeping alive, like being alive. Where is food going to come from the next day? How am I going to keep this roof over my head? Simply, it was survival. So, I mean, we can only imagine. I always say, God bless our ancestors. I can only imagine we could not survive a day in their shoes. But it's heavy. It's heavy, and I think for any millennial parent that's listening, we have a tough job to do, where we were raised in a different way, and then we want to raise our children in a different way. And then there's us in the middle here in this space where we're just kind of like, damn, I gotta sit with all of this. So it's not easy, but it's the most, it's urgent. It must be done.
It must be done. And the work to break those generational cycles, it's a privilege to be able, as you said, I mean, it's privileged for even us to be having us thinking about that in a different way, because we're not in that kind of survival mode, as you said. And then also to have the education there to be able to do that work within yourselves. Because I can imagine when you had that realization, actually, why am I parenting in this way, or whatever it is, and I want to do it differently, you would have had to do some work with yourself to be able to then be the parent that you want to be. So be able to do all of that, that's hard in a system that is not created for us. And so I'm interested to know your thoughts on, like, I guess, how colonialism, if you're happy to touch on it, the schooling. I know that this was not part of what we had discussed,
Okay.
but I'm just interested in whether you've got an opinion on the schooling system as well, and how all of that just doesn't necessarily set up parents for success.
Oh, girl, I have an opinion on that.
Yeah, you do.
Okay, so, the system wasn't built with us in mind. So when I say us, I mean, people of the global majority. I don't like to use the term ethnic minority, because we are not. Global majority. It wasn't built for our Black and brown children. So if we look at the education system, and I'm just talking about the UK here, it was built to uphold the empire. Okay, so when I say empire, I mean like imperialism, I mean, colonialism, all of those sort of things. But also, I think, Nicole, the conversation, just to shift it a tiny bit also, because I know we were talking a little bit about, gentle parenting and positive and all of that sort of stuff. I think it's really important. And I think this is why a lot of parents from our communities do kind of, I don't want to look at that, because they also understand that being able to gently parent in a system that does not serve our children is a whole damn privilege, because our children are not seen the same way that a white child. Sometimes I look at my girls and it breaks my heart, because I know that if my 5-year-old was to have a tantrum, we went shopping today, she was to lie on the floor and have a tantrum, people would not look at her in the same way that they would look at a white child. And because I've got all 3 girls, if you look at if you have the understanding of the way that Black girls are seen, and that they're seen to be, what's that word that we usually use in our communities, fast. I think it's fast that we usually use, don't we? It's the process of, adultification, where a 7-year-old will be seen as a 15-year-old, right?
Yeah.
So we need to understand that, number one, gentle parenting is a privilege. And I think one of the reasons why most of our people in our communities do shy away from it is because they know that our children are not seen the same. So that's the first bit. And if we take it back to colonization, actually, let's go a little bit backwards. So, sorry, education system, but let's take it to Black history. And can I just say, anybody listening in here that works in the education sector, God bless you, because a lot of it isn't your fault. You're just simply upholding a national curriculum that was, I don't know, most recently, Nicole, if you've seen who's writing the curriculum, absolutely insane, but very intentional at the same time. But let's take it to Black history. All we are taught is a little bit about the civil rights movement, if you are lucky, and then we just talk about slavery, just a little bit, and that's it. We don't talk about anything else. The most infuriating thing for me is that we need to remember that Black history did not start with slavery. That is not where we came from. But the system will not teach you that. And this is so important for all children, but specifically Black children, to understand that your history came from riches, it came from empires, it came from kingdoms, it came from, and we must teach ourselves, but also our children that. Because if the system won't, then we must.
Yeah.
Whew. Okay, let's move to colonialism. I think the one thing that we need to understand about colonialism is, whilst it was about land, it was about occupation, it was about all of that. So when I'm referring to colonialism here, I am talking about the British Empire, but also we do understand it was the French, it was the Dutch, it was, there was other people, other powers involved. But it wasn't just about land. It simply re-engineered people. I'm going to go as far as saying that. It re-engineered people. It absolutely destroyed indigenous way of life. It absolutely destroyed family systems, structured the way that our ancestors did things. Because people always ask me, and I get this question quite a lot, well, how is colonialism related to parenting? And I just want to try and give some specific examples. So if we look at the subcontinent, if we look at, the partition of India and Pakistan, and then if we look at Africa is obviously a bloody huge continent. So let's not even talk about it like it's a country, because that pees me off, right? But if we look at the scramble for Africa, for anybody that knows a little bit about their history, and I actually teach my girls this as well. But if we look at what happened during that time, if we look at the transatlantic slave trade, as a community, we need to unlearn, and this is something that I say all the time, we need to unlearn the agency that other people had over our minds and over our bodies. And I'm going to say that again. As a community, we need to unlearn the agency that other people had over our bodies and over our minds, because that's simply what it comes down to. Because this is why, like, if you look at the British, right, they ruled with authority, they ruled with fear, they ruled with punishment, they ruled with, they needed our ancestors, or they needed people of that time to be obedient. They needed people of that time to be easily governable. So obviously they're going to use fear, they're going to use, punishment, they're going to use the killing people, quite literally. I don't know how simple I'm supposed to put it, but that's literally what they did. So if you think about survival, if you think about what that would have done to a person, if you think about what it would have done to them emotionally, let alone even physically, in those times, keeping silent was safer. Like, you couldn't speak up. You couldn't speak up against authority. You couldn't speak up and say, oh, this hurts me, or why did you do this? You couldn't do that because you were merely thinking about surviving.
Yeah.
So what we forget is, because that's what our ancestors inherited, it was simply pain that was not processed, that passed down. When that pain is not processed, it obviously trickles into what you believe. It trickles into your parenting style. It trickles into behaviors, it trickles into every single thing, which is why now that we are here today, and a lot of people in our communities, we believe that we must protect our children from the world. So we have to be harsher to them inside our own homes, so they expect it when they're outside. Because if we're loving and gentle to them, how are they going to survive? And that is the mindset that a lot of our ancestors had. And that's why emotional maturity or emotional expression is non-existent in a lot of our families. That's why a lot of our families have mental health conditions, but they don't want to accept it. They will not talk about it. That's why a lot of our ancestors, I mean, I remember my grandmother, she sat me down for ages. This is when I was a teenager. And I look back now and I think, girl, why did you not listen to her? But she was just telling me the history of the things that she experienced. But most people in our families will not talk about it, because for them it's I turned out fine, because they can't. And this is how let's say cultural norms have trickled down into our homes, and this is why it shaped our parenting styles. And a lot of us today as parents, as did I as mothers, we've inherited that. But it's not all doom and gloom. It's, you do not have to take forward what you inherited. It's up to us to obviously re-examine it, think it, unpack it, as heavy as it is, because it is really heavy. But it's on us for the next generation.
Oof, there's a lot there. There's so much that I was making note. I think you have beautifully articulated what that generational trauma looks like, because it is that, I think you said was it the rewiring?
Yeah.
It was the breaking of the mind, the breaking of families, the breaking of culture, the breaking of traditions, the breaking of love, the breaking of everything you knew your world to be over generations. And as you said, it's passed down. What I always find really hard and I struggle with is the fact that I know my kids are going to be held to a higher standard than their white counterparts. And I sometimes feel like I have to be harsher than my other white friends are with their kids. I'm like, but you don't have the privilege to go around and do X, Y, and Z, because you will be seen as a threat. You will be viewed differently. And whether people want to acknowledge that or not, or say, oh no, I won't, I will view all kids the same. That's not true. That's not true.
100%.
And I feel a need to prep and prepare the kids for things that I don't want to. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like having conversations with, with my eldest around you being Black.
Yeah.
And you need to, before you start school, you need to have an awareness of who you are, what this means, and, obviously in an age appropriate way, but starting to, you're having this conversation, you're thinking about things way, way, way earlier than I would want to, because I'm consciously in the back of my mind thinking I have to prepare you for, I don't want to call it the harsh realities of the world, but maybe it is. It probably is the harsh realities of it. And so, yeah, I would definitely say I'm probably, if I think about all the mum friends or families that I know, it's the Black and brown ones who are the strictest, who are, and not that they're harsh.
Yeah.
But they are, the kids have to be respectful. The kids, again, and again, I'm not saying that kids shouldn't be, but from a very young age, it's like 2, 3, 4, 5, really expecting the kids that they must do certain things, and there's not as much leeway to not.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Nicole. And I think with what you're saying, it just reminds me of the fact that it's because it was expected from us.
Yes. Oh, 100%. 100%. And if you didn't, it was viewed as being incredibly rude. And even what you said around, I'm jumping a bit, but even what you said around the loyalty that you have towards your family, so all of that, the weight of loyalty and expectations I have from family members or my parents, it weighs heavy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And to all of that, so just those expectations, those cultural expectations, they are just embedded in. And I couldn't tell you when that I couldn't say, oh, when I was 5, my parents instilled, it was just like it's always organically, naturally been there that, and I'm trying to think, so I don't know a Caribbean person that doesn't feel a sense of loyalty
Mm,
towards their parents, and that shows up
mm.
in different ways. Um,
I think
it's
a lot of it was unspoken, because you were saying that you don't remember the exact moment. A lot of it was unspoken, probably because we saw it happening to other children, or it was just modeled and it was just what was expected. So I think a lot of it was unspoken. But Nicole, quickly, I want to touch on something that you said around your kids, because it just reminded me of something that I have always had to do with my girls as well. So with my girls, it's we've had to have the conversations of racism very, very early, because I knew that that is possibly something that they could experience and probably will experience. And the other conversation that we always have is, don't let anyone touch your hair.
Girl. Yes,
That one
we've
absolutely.
had, yeah. And it's surprising because sometimes it's the children, yeah, fair, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's the adults, it's the parents of children.
Do you
It's
know,
just,
it's
there's no words. It's just, uh,
there's no words. I don't know what to say. But yeah, we've had to have that conversation.
yeah,
Yeah, no words.
it's, and this is the burden or the weight that is on Black and brown parents to give and impart that knowledge and that education onto their kids. I feel,
Absolutely.
even with navigating through the school system, in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, I have to, I have to be one step ahead of the teachers and of
Mm,
school, because statistically, and I've got a son, statistically, you're not going to do well in school.
mm,
The system, the odds are not in your favor. I have to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to prepare you to have the best experience, especially when, there's not a lot of, even, diversity of teachers there's so much extra weight that goes into it, where I'm thinking 10 steps ahead compared to my
yeah.
white counterparts, and it does make me feel sad. It does.
It's I think the weight is it's so heavy, and I think one thing that really upsets me, and it kind of brings us to what I was saying right at the beginning, is that when these conversations are not being had, or there's not space for these things to be included,
Mm,
it makes you feel it can make you feel like you're going a little bit crazy. Like, are you just making these things up for yourself? When obviously it's not. It's just rooted in your reality as
yeah.
either having Black children or brown children, and that's the truth of it.
I guess that, because we mentioned about loyalty towards parents, and I guess I want to talk a little bit about that tension between kind of honoring them and what they've given us culturally, but then also staying true to ourselves as well. And
Mm,
how do we get that balance right? How can we express that kind of gratitude towards them, but also feel like we're standing in our own autonomy and in our own selves?
yeah. I think for me, and I'm just speaking from my journey here particularly, it was the understanding where I came to a place that you can honor your parents, as in you can love them, you can respect them, but at the same time, you can still look back and think, well, that was really horrible, or that didn't really help me, or that was really unhelpful, or that was really traumatic. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that you don't love your parents. It doesn't mean you're being disloyal. It doesn't mean you're being disrespectful. You can question your upbringing or your culture, or you can question things without wanting to just throw it all in the bin,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. I
It's
think
the it's the it's the it, it's the nuance, because I
it's
think
all.
I don't speak to a lot of parents who may be feeling, and for anyone feeling like this, I'm just going to say it, because I think sometimes we're too scared to say these things, that you can love your parents to bits and have utmost respect for them. However, you want to be nothing like them.
Yeah. Yeah. Two truths can exist at once. And I think
Absolutely.
we as like as a society, as people need to get comfortable with those complex feelings and you're being pushed and pulled in two different ways. Like you can feel two things at once and that's totally okay. You don't have to land on one,
Yeah,
you know, one solid concrete thought or feeling.
absolutely.
I think where I see this kind of loyalty come up a lot is around the black tax. So that
Mm.
the tax that individuals will pay, or me as a black person may potentially pay, where you're giving money or you're sending money back home or to your parents. um Again, a sense of loyalty, a sense of duty to kind of do that. And sometimes with parents it's an expectation that you will send money back home to do whatever it is they're looking to do, but there's that pressure there that sometimes comes.
So I think this again is part of the conversation that isn't spoken about, because for us, whether it was your grandparents who came or whether it was your parents who came, they also had the same pressure. So for a lot of our parents, whilst it was like survival and putting food on the table and sending us to school and extra tuition or whatever it was, that for them there was still the expectation of, well, who's going to send money back home?
Yeah.
Because either we're building a house back home or we're supporting family back home, because they have made it, they've come to the UK or they've come to whatever Western country they've come to. There's still that expectation because in essence, it's for us, I think a lot of us feel like in order to honor their sacrifices of coming to these countries and enduring everything they did, because they endured a lot, we feel like that sacrifice has to always continually be paid
Paid
back in
out.
essence,
Yeah.
whether monetarily, financially, or whether it's through our own successes, or or whether it's through, and I have this conversation with my parents all the time, whether it's through completing or following through with the dreams that they couldn't, because that's huge.
It's huge, huge. And I will say it is hard to, when you have a child and they're here, you have a life that you have imagined for them.
Yeah.
You have whether you want to say it or not, there's an expectation of how you imagine, or a desire on how you want your child to be, things that you want them to be doing career wise. To separate that is really hard. I want, I would like my kids to be doing something, you know, really be successful, earning lots of money. So if they chose a career path that meant that that wasn't going to happen, I'd be like, okay, this is not what I had expected for you. This is not what I wanted for you. So to kind of break that as a parent of that generation, that's hard.
It is really hard, and I'm smiling because I've got two stories to tell you, Nicole. And I'm such a storyteller, but honestly, they're funny stories. But before I tell the stories, I just want to say that, one of the things, again, privilege, right? One of the things that mothers of, again, Black and brown mothers of this generation, the privilege that we have is to redefine what success looks like for us. And in that redefining of what success looks like, I'm going to say that success for the our parents or grandparents generation was simply, again, it was tied to survival. Because I have a lot of these conversations where it's like, Mariam, why is education just forced down our throats? It's that typical thing, you will end up in McDonald's, right? Me
Yeah.
and my husband laugh about it all the time. But it's literally because when they came to these countries, the epitome of success was anything white, anything white. And that was obviously the education, that was the high flying careers. And that's what, that was the epitome of success, which is why now for us growing up, it was like academia forced down your throat, even to the point that my dad, bless him today, still says, Mariam, why haven't you pursued that PhD yet? You're so clever, you can do it, we'll support you with the kids. And I'm like, Dad, it's not happening. Don't know if it will in the future. I'm so sorry. Right. But here's the story. So me and my mum and my eldest, we went to central London last year, just to play tourist. And we were walking past, I think it was the University Arts College of London or something like that. And my eldest, she absolutely loves arts. Like, she loves it, bless her. And I said to her, oh, look, who knows, in a couple of years' time, you might be going there. And my mom goes, what do you mean she might be going there? What's she going to do with art? What money is that going to give her? And I just thought, gosh, mum, like it's funny. I laughed about it, bless her. But again, it goes back to the fact that there is a reason why we are quite what's the word to use? We're quite set on these career paths. So, the doctor, the engineer, the lawyer, that those sort of career paths. But even for myself, I'll be completely honest with you, and I've shared this before. My two daughters, they find it so hilarious to really just wind me up. So they're at that age where they go, Mum, what would you say if we said to you we wanted to be YouTubers? You can make a lot of money being a YouTuber. And I looked at them and I thought, I literally said to her, I said, no, you're going to university, you're getting your degree, you're doing all of that first, you're getting your career. And if you would like to do the YouTubing on the side, that's fine by me. But don't tell me that you are going to be a YouTuber. But it's funny, but again, it's the programming where it's what is success. So it's just really interesting because it's come up for me as well, and in kind of my definition of what success is as well.
Because on that, what is success? It makes me think, do we have a choice as what success looks like yet? Because, many of us don't have that generational wealth there. It does make me think, do we, living in a busy city, I'm in London, living in London, do we have a choice as to what success looks like? Or are we still the generation who's like, well, we have to be in a high flying career to have the money to be able to give us that choice? There's no wealth, there's no inheritance coming our way. How do you, how do we let our children be authentic to themselves and what they want to be, but also, if you want to live in a city, it costs money.
That's it. And I think that's where you and I are probably at right now when it comes, I'm assuming, when it comes to our kids, where it's the reality of the world. The reality of the world is you need a whole lot of money, especially if you're living in London, you need that. And it's, whilst, yes, pursue your passions, whatever they may be, but the reality is there are certain careers that give you that be able to afford that lifestyle, and there are certain careers which may not. So again, I think it's the nuance, isn't it? Where it's kind of like, yes, pursue your passions, but also we live in the real world. And that's probably something that I'm still navigating with my kids today, because it is real. It is absolutely real.
It's a hard one. Even as an adult, how do you get the juggle right between your own passions versus, as you said, the realities of the world? And things are expensive. Especially if you want to live, there's a certain quality of life that you want to live. It requires money. It makes it tricky.
Absolutely. I think that's really interesting, actually. So for myself, I quit my 9 to 5 after I had my older two. So now I work for my damn self, right? So I'm a speaker, and obviously, so I remember when I was choosing to make that decision, it was the most frightening decision in my life. Because for anybody that knows, when you work for yourself, that income stability that you had in your 9 to 5 is not so stable anymore. So for me, even navigating that space and coming off let's say, the quote unquote traditional path that our parents wanted for us was a very heavy space for me to navigate as well. And then that's going to take the conversation off to a completely different tangent about how women of color are, how they are paid, and whether we talk about, diversity and inclusion, or whether that's a tick box, and whether we really want them there, and how we marginalize, in a corporate spaces, how our voices are marginalized. And even obviously for myself as a Muslim woman, as a visibly Muslim woman, you've got the extra layer of, the prejudice and everything that comes with that. So it's heavy. We're navigating those spaces, but you know what? We are showing up anyway. And we know that the system was, again, like I said, the system was not built for us. That's okay. We build our own table and we march forward and we continue. And because you know what, honestly, like we said at the beginning, Nicole, there are children or teenagers or young adults who are looking to break into spaces and to do things. And if we don't, as difficult as it may be, if we don't kind of show up in those spaces and take up space, it may be difficult for them to believe that that's even possible for them as well. But yeah.
I agree. And as we as we're navigating all of that, as we're navigating, you know, raising our children, raising them in a society that wasn't built for them, that the institutional structures weren't designed and built for us, navigating that generational trauma, trying to find a way that we can parent us, like we're trying to find a new way to parent. How do we how do you move forward? How do you grieve what you didn't have? Because there's a sadness in that, in maybe a parenting approach that you wanted as a child but didn't get. And now you've got your own kids, you're there thinking, oh, I don't know how my parents may have parented me in that specific way. Now that I've got children, I couldn't imagine it. So how do you grieve that loss and that sadness and then go, okay, cool, I've accepted that. I want to move forward. Like, how do those two things happen? The grief, the loss, the sadness, and then the stepping forward into what does parenting for me look like now?
Do you know, as you were speaking, there's something that comes to my mind. I think it was like a quote that always flies around on social media. And it's, you must heal first before you have children, or something like that, something about healing
Yeah.
first. And that really drives me up the wall, because I genuinely don't believe that I wouldn't be the woman and mother sitting in front of you today if I had not had my children, because they forced me to confront parts of myself that A, I didn't even knew existed, or B, I was just pretending that it didn't exist. So I
Mm.
didn't give space. So when you use the word grieve, I was like, wow, because that is so true, that as you raise your kids, there will be elements that you will have to grieve, because you become the mother that perhaps you wanted. And you start to realize the things that perhaps the way in which you wanted to be loved, or the way in which you wanted to be cared for, that your
Mm.
parents just simply could not give to you. And that is the most heartbreaking
Yeah.
point to come to. And I definitely came to that point where it's not just a one time, okay, I accept it. Of course, it's not, that's not how it works, but it's the grieving where it's making space for your emotions, where it's, now that my girls are teenagers and they are allowed to have an opinion other than mine, or they are allowed to say, no, actually, mum, I don't agree, or mum, actually, you're wrong. And I stand there and I'm like, oh my goodness, I would have been never could imagine saying that to my parents. There's that running commentary that goes through your head like, how dare you? If only you knew. Those are the parts that you need to grieve. Those are the parts that you need to hold space for, where it's like, I know that you wasn't allowed to have their opinion, or I know that you wasn't allowed to use your voice or take up that space, but it's not to say that you can't go back in time. None of us can, right? So allowing us to, it's holding space for those emotions whilst recognizing that the child in front of you today is someone completely different. That's not you. So they,
Mm.
they may not necessarily need what you thought that you needed, which I think is really interesting. And so for me in my journey, it was accepting that, they did the best they could. They may not even be able to give me what I need today. And that was a continual journey of really accepting that. And then thirdly, just humanizing yourself. Humanizing yourself. I think as parents, we dehumanize ourselves. Sometimes we perform. I'm going to go as far as saying that, especially as mothers. Sometimes we perform where it's kind of like, gotta get up, gotta put on this, motherhood, get the kids ready for school, and you just kind of wear this mask, and you're not a you're not a whole person. Because
Mm.
what I tried to do differently in my parenting was, with my girls, it's like, if I'm upset, I will say, I'm upset. I may not say what I'm upset about, but mommy's feeling a little bit sad today. I'm feeling a bit upset. And the other day I was actually feeling like that, because obviously as women, we are very hormonal, right? So I was coming on my period and I was like, do you know what, girls, to my older ones, my 5-year-old doesn't understand, obviously. I said, my girls, do you know what? I just feel really, I just feel really horrible. I don't know why. I don't know why, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to sit and catch up on the latest season of Bridgerton. And that's what I did, right? So what I'm saying is it's just giving space for your emotions. Like, you are allowed to feel a range of emotions. You are a human, but also accepting that maybe even today they may not be able to give what you need them to, but that doesn't mean that you can't learn, right? And here's the key word for me, most definitely, that you can't learn to give your kids what they need. Because I remember that when I had to start making space for all of my girls' emotions, it was like, I don't even know how to make space for my own.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to do with my own emotions. So
Yeah.
it's not, that going back to that quote of heal yourself first, you don't have to heal yourself first. You can do it alongside your kids because they are going to confront parts of you that maybe if you didn't have them, you wouldn't even know existed. So bless them. They do hold up a mirror for us. And whilst it's not easy, it can be liberating.
It is liberating. It is liberating. And it's yeah, you said it perfectly. They hold up a mirror and then you're like, oh, I didn't realize that this 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 triggers me. This makes me feel uncomfortable. Like I don't like what's going on here. And then I think it's important as parents that we are curious, that we're always being curious. Like, why is this feeling showing up for me?
Mm,
Why am I having these thoughts? Why have I had like a visceral reaction because my child is on X? What is going on there? Where has that come from? You're curious about those emotions and you're not just like pushing it down, which is easy to do because sometimes it feels like you're on a hamster wheel and you're just
yeah.
going, going, going. I really liked what you said about humanizing yourself, but it made me think about my mum.
Mm,
And actually growing up, a lot of the time, I remember thinking that she was like this superwoman. She never, I'm not saying she was like stoic or anything like that, but she never kind of like got upset. She was always just very like together and very on it. And, she just did so much. And I look back and I just think, how did she seem like, how was she so composed? And I think, you know, it almost kind of gave me a false sense of what motherhood was going to be like. Because then I would look back and be like,
mm,
why am I not as composed? Why can't I do it all? Why am I not like her? And yeah, I think it's really, that's where I felt very confronted by a comparison over someone who, to be honest, she must have, yeah, it was hard. She just wasn't showing it to me. It was hard. The women in my life did struggle, as we all do, with motherhood, with life in general, but I never saw it.
mm.
And so it's definitely be interesting come in terms of like the more sadder feelings and being comfortable with like saying that. Similar to what you said of your girls being like, I'm not feeling good today. And saying it and it being okay to just like feel a bit crap.
Absolutely. And I think, Nicole, what you've just said actually just reminded me of something just about the women that you're surrounded with and like the women in your family. Because I know a lot of the narrative is, our mothers were so strong or our aunties were so strong. And I don't agree. I don't agree that it was just that they were so strong and they just didn't give themselves permission to break down, or they weren't allowed to break
They
down.
weren't
They weren't allowed to
they
just
weren't
be
allowed.
human. Because I talk to now as they're older, I talk to my aunties, I talk to my mom, and how did you do it, mom? How did you do it? And she's like, because we just had to. We just had to
Yeah.
carry on. It was what was expected from family members, or the males in our family. It was just expected, and it's just what we all we knew. We just had to carry on. There was no have a rest day. There was no have boundaries. There was none of that there that existed. So it's not that they were strong, but it's just that they suppressed it entirely, so much so that it manifests as, we know the statistics around why so many women are diagnosed with autoimmune diseases, and it manifests physically in your body. It doesn't just go away. So another thing that just off the back of what you said, Nicole, is it's so powerful when you mention your mum, because it just shows us that the women around us, whether it's our mothers, whether it's our friends, or whether it's family, they then become the blueprint of what we then expect of ourselves.
Yeah,
So
100%.
now that I know, for me, I'm very conscious, and it's this, I'm gonna say for girls first, but for me, because I've got girls, I'm very conscious of, well, what is the blueprint that I'm giving to my girls? What will they then expect from themselves when they become mothers, if they choose to be? Or even if you have boys, obviously I don't, but it's the same for boys. It's like when they grow up to be men, what will then they expect from, the mother of their children?
Yes. Yes. And
Huge.
huge. It's huge. And and this is it's such a honor and responsibility to be a parent and to really give the foundations and the blueprints to the children, to our kids, and to really think about what behaviors do we want to model to our children. So many of us never saw the women in our lives rest.
Mm.
We never saw them just pause because they were always on the go. Maybe they wasn't able to, or whatever it was. We never saw them rest. And so growing up, you have a sense, or like now, a feeling of I must constantly be doing,
Yes. Yeah.
doing, on the move, doing. And I, I mean, I have learned that it's important to rest. I've learned that it's important that I model to my daughter, most importantly, my daughter, how important it is to rest and to have to take
Mm.
a break. And you can't go on autopilot at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. And as you said, so many women, physically hitting up their 50s, their 60s, their 70s, it's now affecting their health. It may not have showed up back then when they were younger, but it's certainly showing up now as they're aging.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is revolutionary. I mean, I remember growing up and I don't know, I don't think I ever saw my mom just resting,
It's
be it
easy.
sitting on the sofa or just. And now for me, I'm like, I remember, and whenever I did, it was like, Mom, are you sick? Are you ill? What's wrong? And it was always because she was not well. But now for me, I'm just like, well, girls, guess what? I've just finished from work and, whatever. And, I'm going to take half an hour and I'm just going to lie here in bed. Mommy, are you going to sleep? No, I'm just lying here in bed because I want to, and it's so important.
Agreed. One question that I have is how can parents begin to heal their unmet needs so they don't necessarily project those onto their children?
We have to accept that we have unmet needs first. We got to go backwards because some of us don't even know that we have needs. And I know that sounds wild to say out loud, but
For
I
sure.
speak to so many, specifically mothers, who, when I say, well, what are your needs? Like, what do you need? It's what the kids needs, or it's what the husband needs, or it's what the work needs, or it's what the friend needs. It's no, what do you need?
Yeah.
And sometimes
Independently of all of that. Yeah.
you don't know. And which is why I always say that the most important thing is to humanize yourself and to know that whilst, yes, you are a mother and you love your kids to bits and you don't need to justify that. Because what I hear a lot of mothers do, it's, I love my kids to bits, but
But
it's like, we know that. I used to do it myself as well, by the way. We know that, but you are fully functioning human being. You're a whole woman. And when you start to see yourself as a whole woman, not just as the daughter, the sister, the auntie, the cousin, the mother, the wife, the blah, 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 all of our roles. And I remember the first time somebody asked that, it actually was on a podcast interview. And the first thing she said to me, she goes, "Who is Mariam?" And in my head, I thought, crap, here I am going to reel off all my roles and everything I do. And she goes, no, no, no. I don't want to know what you do for work. I don't want to know any of that. But who is Mariam outside of all of those
yeah.
roles? I kid you not, Nicole, 15 years ago, I would not be able to answer that question. Like, I do not know. I do not know who Mariam is aside from being all of the things that she does.
Can you answer that now?
Oh, yes, I can. Yeah. Do you,
Yeah.
so I would say that I am a nurturer. I am a rule breaker. That's definitely what I am. But yes, I very much can answer that now, but 15 years ago, I couldn't. But let's go back to the question. I would say it's first accept that you have needs and that you are allowed to have needs. Because when we were all babies and we came out of our mother's womb, we cried. When our nappies were wet, we cried. When we were hungry, we cried. So we knew that we had needs. We knew they existed and we knew how to communicate that. It was very instinctual. That's natural. Somewhere along the lines, we have been taught, programmed, shamed, disciplined out of us that you shouldn't have them,
Mm.
that they shouldn't exist. And maybe that was spoken or unspoken. A lot of it sometimes is unspoken. So first accept that they exist and you're allowed to have them. And then secondly, I think it goes back to the conversation that we had, Nicole, about our children. Our children sometimes will hold up a mirror to us and force us to see that we have all these unmet needs. Maybe it's burnout, maybe it's resentment, maybe it's love, maybe it's care, maybe it's fulfillment.
Mm.
I know for me, definitely in my journey, a lot of it was fulfillment, but it was fulfillment outside of motherhood. It was fulfillment outside of work. It was fulfillment outside of friendship. And for a long time, I struggled with knowing or understanding what that looked like or what that felt like, because even for myself growing up, I don't think I've experienced that. So it's what does fulfill you? And sometimes that's a heavy question to sit with, because you may not know what that is outside of your roles. But for most of us, for as mums, I would say it starts with the basics. You know, have you drunk enough water? Are you eating 3 nutritious meals a day, or are you just eating the kids' scraps or whatever they've left over? You're just picking up a sandwich for Tesco, you know, on your work break. Are you eating correctly? You know, I remember, and I say this to every single woman that I speak to, it's sometimes our behavior, especially as parents, maybe it's not, maybe it is the generational trauma, but maybe some of it is not. Maybe it's because you just haven't eaten, or you're not hydrated, or maybe it's because you're so depleted in your vitamin and mineral levels, and you're so deficient that that's affecting just how you are, you know, how you communicate with your kids. Or maybe it's, you know, your hormones. I know as we age as women, oh God, let's not talk about that, but you know, the hormones play a big part.
Mm.
So it's when we think about fulfillment, it's, there's that aspect of things, but also what fulfills you. I think that's a huge question to really ask. And I remember when I came to a point where I realized, damn, Mariam, you have a lot of unmet needs. And whilst we can't fulfill them all at once, and whilst we may not be able to fulfill them entirely ourselves. So for example, if you have, you know, close friends, and I said this somewhere else quite recently, I said, do you know, when we think about mothering, we always think about our children, but as women, we also mother each other. There are parts, there are
Mm.
needs that my best friend has met of mine that I didn't even know existed. So when you think about your needs, yes, there's some of your needs that you will be able to kind of tend to yourself. If it's the love, it's the care that, you know, that you're not giving to yourself, how can you give that to yourself? Maybe it's making space for your emotions. Maybe it's, you know, switching off work and, you know, going out for a dessert with a friend. Maybe it's once the kids have gone to bed, you know, you're catching up with some voice messages over WhatsApp, or maybe it's a phone call. What is it that you are missing, and that you are perhaps suppressing or just pretending that doesn't exist? Because we're very good at doing that. We're very good at
Yeah.
numbing. We're very good at switching on Netflix and doom scrolling. We're all very guilty of it. But we know that those unmet needs don't go away. We know that those unmet needs don't just spill out onto ourselves, they spill out onto our loved ones. And we know that the first people that it usually spills out to, unfortunately, bless them, are our kids, because obviously they're the closest things to us, bless them. But when you start noticing that you start behaving in ways where it's not you, you know it's not you deep down, really just begin to ask yourself, right, what is an unmet need here that maybe perhaps I need to look at?
Yeah, 100%. It goes back to continually being curious and
Yeah.
answering yourself those difficult questions. You know, when you were speaking, I was thinking, what are my needs and what fulfills me? And I realized early on that I needed to socialize with adults without my children. Like that, I need it. I just have to be on a weekly basis. But if I can feel it, if I don't have that socializing aspect planned into my diary, or that hasn't happened for a few weeks, I'm getting agitated. It's a need that I absolutely must have, and I have work to prioritize it. But the question of what fulfills you is an interesting one. I don't know what that would be. Outside of the children, work, being a wife, something for me. Yeah, I don't know.
It's huge. I think sometimes we are it's so easy. We get so consumed in just our roles that we may not really know so deep, really know who we are outside of our roles. And I think this is I don't
100%.
I'm an eldest daughter. I don't know. I think it's it's not just for eldest daughters, but I think for eldest daughters it's quite um a specific take in terms of because we take on so many roles, but obviously generally as women we take on so many roles. And I love that for you. And I was smiling when you said that, that's something you know that you need, because I'm very similar in that sense that I know that it has to be at least once a week. Otherwise, I am
Yeah.
going absolutely berserk in my head, and you will see it in my behavior as well. So I have to prioritize that in order. And here's the thing, when you tend to your unmet needs, it doesn't just serve you, it also serves
Yes,
everybody else
everyone.
around
Yeah,
you.
the whole family benefits when your
And
cup is full.
But in the same way, I think this is what we forget. In the same way that when you don't tend to your unmet needs, it's not just burning you out, is also affecting and I think we said this already, but it's also affecting. So in essence, in order for you to be, a happier, healthier, fulfilled, not perfect, because obviously life is life, right? And you're human. But in order for you to, when you become that person, a mother who prioritizes that, naturally your kids will be happier, right? Because
Mm,
you are able to give them, you are able to give from a place of fulfillment instead of what's just left over.
yeah.
And kids feel the difference, and I'm sure equally as we do as well.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. Outside our roles, we don't know who we are, what gives us joy, what makes us happy. And, I would say probably only this year have I really been able to start asking myself those questions where I feel like I've had the capacity
Yeah,
to be able to do more than just being on the treadmill with the kids, or just with life in general,
yeah.
where I'm actually sitting there being like, what do I even like? Like, what do I even enjoy? I know who I was before I had kids, but do I even still like that same stuff? I feel like I'm in this place now where I'm trying to figure it out. And it's been sad and a little bit scary that I do not know. Like, if you would be like, what makes you happy? I was like, I mean, outside of, yeah, my kids and my husband and some days work,
Mhm.
what do I like? What does Nicole like? It's a huge question mark. And I never thought I was somebody who lost themselves in motherhood. I would never have said that I lost myself, lost my identity. I would never have viewed myself in that way. But as I'm doing the work this year, I'm like, oh god damn, I did lose myself. I did lose myself. Oh my gosh. I didn't even realize.
Do you know,
Didn't
Nicole, that speaks to me so much. I always say there are seasons of motherhood. So there are
Mm,
seasons of motherhood where it's like you've got the babies, you've got the toddlers, you've got the newborns, and then you've got the primary, and the different sort of stages. But then you also might be in a space similar to myself where you've got the teens, but then you've also still got the toddlers. So there's seasons of motherhood where, for me, when I look back now, that season where I just had the older two and it was the newborn and it was the 2-year-old, that was a season of survival. And
yeah.
it was the most difficult thing that I've probably been through in my life, where if
Mm,
you had asked me, Mariam, what is your favorite color? I would not have been able to tell you.
yeah. Just gone. Who knows? Orange, maybe. Yeah.
So that really spoke to me, and I'm sure that it will speak to a lot of people where it's it's we either feel like we lose our identity completely, or it's the identity is shifting. And as we're
Yeah.
going through that season, it's like, okay, I've got through this now. Well, who am I?
Yeah. What's on the other side? And I do find it hard personally to hold and give myself grace. People say, "Oh, I'll give yourself grace, be kind to yourself, do all that." I
Mm.
find that tricky. I really struggle to not be hard on myself. I really, really struggle with that.
I can deeply resonate with that, and I'm glad that this conversation came to this, because I know that for a lot of us, a lot of mums, we have that harsh inner critical voice. And a lot of it isn't us. Obviously, it may or may not be the echo of our primary caregivers. And because so many of us have been brought up in households where it is criticism, but in the name of love, it's the tough
Yeah.
love. I'm doing this because I want the best for you, because I want more for you, or I'm trying to help you, and all of this sort of that narrative. So it's the process of kind of breaking down that critical voice inside ourselves, where you can kind of sit with yourself and say, well, it's okay. Like, it's okay to make a mistake, or it's okay just to have a bad day. It's okay that you spoke to your children in a certain way, and it's okay. Like, tomorrow is a new day. Like, forgive yourself and have grace with yourself. Or it's okay, you're juggling work and you're juggling the kids and you're juggling a million other things. It's okay. But you know what, Nicole? I think for me, what really helped me and is that and that the cultures, again, that we come from, and I am centering Black and brown communities, they're very collectivist, right? And I think what we're seeing at the moment, especially on social media, is individualism, right? Is this
Oh, yeah.
hyper individualism. Now, I'm not saying that the collectivist cultures that we come from were perfect, because they were not, because that came with a heck of other stuff that came with as well, right? Like things like always having to be on watch for what people will say, and how you present yourself, and performing, and the image and the outside and all of that, because that comes with that. But whilst when we look at the kind of the individualism, where it's like, I can do this by myself, I don't need anybody's help, me, myself, and I, and my nuclear family, and my feelings, and blah 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 blah, and all of that, right? For me, what really helped me with that inner critical voice is, sometimes when I'm feeling like that, just simply sharing it with someone, sharing it with a friend, that, I'm spiraling. This is what I'm thinking. And maybe, a close friend or a close family member, or someone you could confide in, your husband, just kind of helping you through that. Because I had a moment most recently, I was like, this is not going anywhere. What's the point? And I was on the verge of tears. And my best friend, she looked at me and she just said, but that wasn't the time, Mariam. That wasn't the time. You didn't have the support to do what, X, Y, Z, whatever. You have, you've done absolutely amazing. And she was just kind of coaching me through, like, and
Oh,
being my voice for me at a time where I just couldn't get myself out of that. And in sharing this, I just want to use this as an example, as part of humanizing yourself. That it's okay that the cultures that we come from expect us to be perfect and to know it all. You don't have to. You can be human. It's okay. We all go through it. Some of us are just too scared to say it out loud. And part of that just makes you human. And you are allowed to be human. And I'm going to leave it with that.
what a beautiful way to leave it. So, yeah, humanize ourselves. And I think use the people around us
Absolutely.
to support us and journey with us in life. There's one question I ask all my guests, and that is, if you had one word or phrase to describe your motherhood journey, what would that be?
Liberating.
Ooh,
That's it.
give us more. Give us a sense of liberating. How? What does that mean for you?
Liberating, it freed me from an identity I was carrying that wasn't mine. Liberating from beliefs that weren't mine. Liberating from pain that wasn't mine to continue forward and carry. Liberating to just be who I am. I think my girls continue to remind me that it's okay to be me, that I don't have to continue to just perform for the sake of sacrifices that my parents or my grandparents made, that it's okay to be
To be authentically you.
unapologetically. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so, so much for this conversation. I've enjoyed absolutely all of it. So thank you for being a guest.
Thank you. No, thank you, Nicole, for having me. And I'm so glad, like, my evening is finishing with this. I've deeply enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that it will speak to a lot of mothers.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely will. Definitely will. And yes, if you would like to connect with Mariam, follow her at Black and Brown Parenting on Instagram or visit her website, blackandbrownparenting.co.uk as well. And all the details will be in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole.
Bye.
Bye.
How do you juggle a busy household when you have to cook, clean, and look after the family? Now, one thing that helps me in particular is HelloFresh. We use HelloFresh every single week to help us with our meal prepping. And quite frankly, it's just one less thing to think about and one less thing off the to-do list. And my mental load feels so much lighter. So if you would like to use HelloFresh and have a discount on your next HelloFresh meal, don't forget to check out the show notes where we have our own Squiggly Motherhood discount. Check it out now.